Violence can be minute or major. In For What Are Butterflies Without Their Wings by Onyango, we look at violence through different lenses, through the lenses of the victim and through the lenses of the perpetrator. In the lenses of the victims, we see people who are outrightly terrified by violence, who don't know what they're supposed to do in the face of violence, and so sometimes we just sit still. So hi, I'm Roving. Welcome to Roving True Books, and today we'll be reviewing For What Are Butterflies Without Their Wings by Onyango. I stumbled into this collection of stories and I'd heard a lot about it. Because of that, I expected so much. Now, this is one of the reasons why I like when people do not tell me about a book. I like finding it by myself, but it was already too late. And I needed to read a short story collection, and this was what I saw. Do you understand? So, the thing with this is, I had high expectations for this book because they've told me that this is a must read. You would love it. Blah blah blah. Sorry to say, but I didn't enjoy it as much as some other short stories I had read. Maybe it was due to the hype. I'm not very sure, but it just didn't hit as hard as I expected it to hit. I'm sorry. Yes, so back to my review. And this collection of short stories that are set in Ghana, they tell us several things. They teach us especially about violence. So in the titular story, For What Are Butterflies Without Their Wings, I see kind of violence that is very unsettling. I remember reading that particular story, and there are sometimes you read some things and it feels like your skin is crawling. That's how I felt because it was just so. You makes you wonder what makes people violent, what makes them tick, what makes them such that why do they imagine these kind of things, or how do they imagine them, how do they see, oh, something is going on like this in this person's life and the only thing I can do is to make it worse, and the way I can make it worse is by doing that. It doesn't really make sense, but when people think that way, and because they think that way, there's really nothing you can do about that, and it's very sad. Although in some sane societies, people like that are taken for reforms, they are taken for rehabilitations. But in places like Nigeria, where oftentimes things like that are often swept under the rug, generally in many African countries, what do we do about those people? We leave them in society. For the way the story started, I felt a little bit guilty because it reminded me of Sitsi Dankareba's nervous conditions, where the FMC was like, I was like happy when my brother died. That was kind of like the vibe, but not really. Do you understand? It wasn't really because this person still felt some sort of um affection for the person who has been perpetrating violence, and it goes to examine how, as people are complex. You can't really understand human beings. So in You Used to Love Me by Adesua Oman Okedi, I love that book a lot, so much. That was the first time I was coming across with violence and the person receiving violence not being totally opposed against it. So the person didn't like it, but she stayed, and it was a pictorial representation of people who stay in abusive homes. So we see these people, and you're like, just leave this place, but they don't leave. And that was the first like experience I had. But in For What I Butterfly Without Their Wings, we see another story where something like this plays out. And for the boy, his violence is a love language. So you show someone you love them by beating them. That's the way he thinks what love is. And we see how his mother reacted to this. And then we see that he gets married and his wife also has a reaction to this. And it raises questions. Why does society not intervene in situations like this? Why does the society leave the woman to stay? Or because if you said there was a rescue situation where they had rescued her and she returned, that would have been a different situation altogether. But there was no story of any rescue situation, and everybody knew this was what was going on, but everybody turned deaf ears. It raises so many questions, those kind of questions, and I like it because these are realities that are happening in our life. Another thing that this book addresses in a subtle way is the way we treat disabled people. And African culture, like I said before I started this review, this series, I did not know how similar African cultures were. But after I've started reading so many African books, I realized that we are very similar. And the way we treat disabled people sometimes it puzzles me because, and why I like it is because it also calls me to self reflect. Because I mean, there are points where I've also done the same things to people where they're like, oh, they are disabled, so I cannot relate to them on a kind of on some levels. I have done that myself, but this place it just made me like, girl, you are a terrible person, and that's one of the reasons why I love reading it. Not it makes you face a mirror to yourself and observe the kind of actions you've taken. So you're like, wow, this is really terrible of me. This is so terrible of me. I would recommend For What Butterflies for people who want a mirror in their face to hold up a mirror that says, oh, you haven't been such an entirely good person. And well, some people can skill the good person test actually. Yeah, some people can skill this because some people are actually really nice, or some people are just blind to their badness, by the way. So yes, there's that. Anyway, so that's all for me for What Are Butterflies Without Their Wings by Troy Onyango. Bye.